Jake Paul and Ben Askren have been announced for I think sometime in April. I think it was April 11th. I don't remember what it is. For an 8-round boxing match, um, live on pay-per-view. Uh, so in the lead up to this, there was a lot of names going around. Connors, Michael Bisping, Dylan Dennis was the biggest name that was being thrown around. Ben Askren was mentioned. Ended up being Ben Askren. Um, damn. Okay, so a lot of people are like, I haven't really heard a lot of, the talk on this is people are really looking at, as far as MMA side, looking at Askren as obviously not the best striker in the sport.
It's probably one of the worst. I think.
Probably one of the worst strikers in our sport.
That's why I think he's. That's why Jake Paul chose him. I think.
Yeah, definitely. Jake Paul knows what he's doing. He's picking guys that are ground fighting oriented, kind of like traditional ground fighters. Um, like with Dylan Dennis, his a jiu-jitsu guy who's barely made his way into MMA, so his striking is still developing. You have Askren, who's far more seasoned, actual MMA veteran, undefeated up until he got to the UFC and he ran into Jorge Masvidal. But before then, he was undefeated. He was a champion Bellator, a champion ONE championship, and a guy who was a specialist in wrestling and built everything else in his game around it and catered to executing his wrestling. And he was so successful at it that he went undefeated. And but the sad thing is really it's kind of like that Jose Aldo Connor thing, is that he got to the UFC, he gets knocked out by a flying knee. He got past Robbie Lawler, controversial fight with Robbie Lawler ending. He goes to Masvidal, gets smoked in the 4 seconds, and then he gets submitted by Damian Maia. Not the best run ever. Granted, he did it a little late in his career, and a bad hip, which he had like a replacement over this past year, and he's been retired for almost 2 years now. So, I mean, perfect fight for Jake Paul to get a win off of somebody who has a credible name in MMA and who's not the most dangerous person, because he's not calling out Douglas Lima, he's not calling out Jorge Masvidal, he's not calling out Israel, he's not calling out Yoel Romero, he's not calling out a lot of guys. He's calling out guys who are
better than Askren.
Yeah,
clearly
more dangerous and bigger and all that stuff. He's calling out guys that are primarily ground fighters with very low striking that are not intimidating people. Ben Askren is not a physically intimidating guy.
No, not at all.
But he's a NCAA champion, Olympian, and has an extensive, pretty impressive MMA resume.
Yeah.
But in MMA, you don't have to be a specialist in any one thing
to be successful.
You have to be good enough in pretty much everything to get by. And if you have a certain special strength, like wrestling or striking or jiu-jitsu,
that's going to benefit you for sure.
Yeah, it'll benefit you in the long run because you built everything else around it, and it makes it even more dangerous to deal with. Whereas boxing, you got one thing to focus on, you got one thing to do, and if you're not good at it, you're pretty much, you got nowhere to go.
Right.
So, as far the overall misconception for a lot of people is that MMA guys don't know how to strike, and that's not necessarily true.
That's who's in there with them.
It depends on who you're talking about, because a lot of guys like Ben Askren never really needed to focus on his striking. He needed to focus on utilizing whatever striking he can learn to setting up what he's really good at and taking you down and beating you up. And that's what he did throughout his career. As when you throw him in there against his weakest strength, against a guy like that's, so as far as Jake Paul is, 3 or 4 years training, nonstop, young, big, athletic kid, a little crazy. Even though he's a YouTuber and made millions already and he's wealthy, he's a very competitive kid, has some athletic ability in
I've
high
seen.
school and accolades in high school. I think he was
Yeah.
like, I think he did wrestling and those other shit. So the kid's an athlete as far as an MMA Olympian Askren level athlete. No, he doesn't have those accomplishments, but he's a big, strong, young, athletic kid
Yeah.
and has dedicated himself to boxing for the past 3 or 4 years, just boxing. And so you get a guy like Askren who hasn't really needed to focus on his boxing, and he's at the stage in his career that he's at.
Yeah.
For us MMA people, this is not a good look for the sport. And this is what I think I'm more worried about is we're we're past that for as far as casual. I think casuals know the difference between MMA and know that boxers, if they go into MMA, they're done in like a minute.
Yeah.
I think people know that. I think most people know that nowadays. I think they really do. 5, 6 years ago, 10 years ago, that wouldn't have been the case.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I definitely think people know that. What did you think? When you
I rolled my eyes at the whole
Yeah.
situation.
Okay. Yeah.
I think, like you said, I think if you're gonna pick one guy to do a boxing match with, I think Askren's the guy.
Yeah.
He's not physically intimidating. You know, he has a dad bod.
He's dad bod for sure. He's
He-
older.
he's way older.
He's weathered. He just had hip surgery.
Yeah, and I mean, he relied on his wrestling throughout his whole MMA
He's a
career.
ground fighter. He's a ground fighter.
Yeah,
and a very good one at that. And
he just
Yeah.
focused on that. Yeah, and you have this YouTuber kid who I've seen play basketball. I think on his channel, who's been focusing 4 years just in boxing, younger and stronger. It'll be easy to pick Jake Paul in this fight. I think this will probably be a best case scenario to fight an MMA guy.
I think he's even got 30 pounds on him. I think he's even got 30 pounds on Askren. He's a bigger guy than Askren.
But I think that because of
That's
how Ben Askren's career ended in the UFC and with
People write him off. Definitely.
If he loses this fight, I think people will say, "Well, that's the same guy who got knocked down in 4 seconds," and kind of like roll their eyes.
So as far as
I
can see that.
Like, I don't think it's going to hurt MMA at all.
So I can see that. As far as the casuals,
Yeah, they say, "Well, yeah, I remember that guy. He's the guy
he's the guy that Masvidal knocked out, right?
Yeah, in 4 seconds. Oh, he sucks."
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
They kind of brush off the whole fight.
Yeah, you're right.
It's a laugh out loud moment.
Yeah,
I think.
Now, as the people that are in defense of Askren, they're going to be like, this guy is like a collegiate champion, an Olympic contender, mostly undefeated MMA champion in multiple divisions, and fought some of the most elite strikers in his weight class. And
all those are true, but that was in his heyday. So
that was in his heyday. Yeah, it's a much different fight.
Yeah.
I can see the way I see a lot of people see the fight going is that either Logan Paul is gonna just kind of technique and speed and power and just youth and just outmatch Askren in every way and probably get him out early. Or the flip side, that Askren's gonna weather any storm that Jake Paul throws at him, tire him out, dirty box him to hell, and probably even finish him in the 7th. Because
I can see both situations happening.
Because Jake Paul hasn't, Askren says the 7th, but I can see it 6th, 7th, 5th. Because Jake Paul really hasn't gone past 3 rounds, and I think he's only had 3 fights, and the one that went the distance, he was gassing out in the 3rd.
Yeah.
So you could take him past the 3rd, and you just dirty box him to hell and tie him up and punch him in the stomach and the head and withstand any
that could be his road to victory.
Which obviously over time the power punches are going to diminish. Askren has a chance to win this fight, and we all know he's got a hell of a chin. He's you got to really Jorge Masvidal flying knee him to get him out of there. So it's a very interesting fight, man.
But I think either way, I think it doesn't hurt MMA's reputation.
Yeah, you think so?
Yeah.
I just hate it. I hate it. Like, Because it's that boxing MMA versus MMA, and then
Yeah,
they always put down MMA like stand up, and it's like we're so past that now, and it's like this kind of brings us
people that
back to
remember
those.
what Askren came from, and his last two losses, they're gonna say, yeah,
I think people are going to write him off. They're going to write him off as a ground
yeah,
guy. They're
yeah.
going to write him off as a guy that got knocked out. Jorge,
I think if anything,
Jorge.
it's gonna make Jake Paul look bad.
Yeah, if he and especially if he loses, they're going to be
Yeah.
like, oh, this guy. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's going to be interesting, man. I don't. Am I going to watch it? Yes. Am I going to pay for it? Probably not, depending on the price. But I'll stream it.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know.
I mean, do we ever pay for a fight? No,
Yeah, I know. No.
even for the biggest ones.
So yeah, that's. I mean, I don't know. I think people are mixed. People are like rooting for Ben, but also worried for Ben. Worried or are rooting for the
I don't
sport.
take it seriously
Parts
just
are-
because how everything.
Yeah.
It's kind of a joke for me.
Do you think it's going to sell a lot?
No,
No,
no.
because he's not a big name, but he's a good trash talker. Both of them are actually.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't see anybody buying a Ben Askren fight, especially a boxing fight.
Yeah, you're right. I think people, and he's the headliner. This is the main fight that people would buy.
It's a snoozer for sure.
Which is good. Because if it goes bad for MMA and Askren, it's kind of good if it falls under the radar.
Yeah.
All right, so that's our piece for that. I think I'm anxious for this fight. Like you look at like a Luke Thomas, he doesn't even want to talk about this fight. You look at like a Shab who kind of looks at it just like kind of like how we are looking at it right now, but not totally emotionally invested. I don't know. I feel like more emotionally invested in this thing. I'm like, it kind of brings me back to like 10 years ago when it was like boxing versus MMA, and everybody puts down boxing. And
People
I'm
were
like,
laughing at the Mayweather Conor fight.
yeah.
That was two bigger names. Conor's a bigger name.
And but Conor did so much for MMA because he held his own for a majority of that fight. And even a boxing head that I used to work with was like, he had nothing but praises for Conor. He's like, damn, he really showed me something. So it justified a legitimate. I don't know if it was the word. MMA stand up. Legitimate. Whatever. it made legitimate.
Yeah.
You know, you got that old Rasputin coming in and creeping in. You know what I mean? Like that.
Legitimize.
Yeah, there you go. MMA stand up because like, oh damn, one of your best strikers held his own against one of our best.
But that's my point. Like that, people were kind of like laughing or rolling their eyes at that fight.
And then they were pleasant surprised. They're probably not even going to take this one seriously, huh?
No, not at all. Just because it's basically a YouTuber versus an obscure
MMA fighter.
Yeah,
I got you. All right, maybe I shouldn't take it that seriously. I'm taking it kind of seriously. I'm nervous. I don't know.